So welcome back to our conversation about Thessalonians. And today I want us to wrestle with, why do you do what you do? And where do you get the encouragement to continue doing it? So let's jump in. We're in chapter 2, and we're going to start with verse 4. But let me remind you, let me take you all the way back to verse 1. You know, brothers and sisters, that our visit to you was not without results. So we do want to see results in what God is doing in our personal life, in our professional life, in our church life, in our small group life, all of that, all right? But why do you do what you do? Verse 4. On the contrary, pause. Verse 3 says, for the appeal we make does not spring from error or impure motives. So we talked about that last time. I'm not doing this just to get one up on you or to make money or to get fame or power. On the contrary, we speak as those approved by God to be entrusted with the gospel. Just think of the weightiness of those words. And what God has given us. We are not trying to please people, but God who tests our hearts. That's a big one. You got to understand, because if you don't understand who you're trying to please, then you don't know where your validation is going to come from. Verse 5, you know we never used flattery, nor did we put on a mask to cover up greed. God is our witness. We were not looking for praise from people, not from you or anyone else, even though as apostles of Christ, we could have asserted our authority. This is a leadership clinic right here.
Yeah, it is.
You know, you got to know why you're doing what you're doing, and it's got to be a reason that it cannot be too shallow a reason.
Yeah.
A paycheck is not worth your life. I mean, and we find that across the board. Every industry has this struggle. If people don't believe in what they're doing, they won't do it with any vigor. They won't do it with any importance, and they won't do it very long.
Yeah.
You know, a paycheck is not worth your life. It's not worth giving away your life. But Paul says we speak as those approved by God. We're not trying to please people. We're not just using flattery. We're not just trying to make money. God is our witness. We're not looking for praise of people, even though we could demand it.
Yeah.
So let's have this conversation. What is the motivation to stay at it in ministry, in Christian life, in walking out my faith in front of people around? Where's the motivation for this?
I think it starts in the approved by God
Yes.
part. You've got to be approved by God. I'm not going to call out any names, but you can look out over social media and just see all the clips of pastors saying wild things, doing wild things. The question is, were you ever approved by God?
Let me chase something. Approved by God. We use this old phrase in the church that we might actually have to explain here if I use it. Do you mean called?
I mean both called and approved.
Okay,
Go ahead and
me through
explain
that.
it. Okay, so I feel like we're all called to spread the gospel, right? But I feel like there's a certain level of approval to step into this realm.
Ah, got you.
Right?
Okay.
So that's where I'm going with that.
Yeah.
So we're all called to. I don't care where you are at the metro. I don't care if you're on the job. I don't care if you're in the supermarket. We're called to.
If you're
to
the dishwasher at the Pizza Hut, you're called to reach people for Christ.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
But there's a certain level of approval before God says, I'm calling you to pastor this church. I'm calling you to lead in this way. And so the question is, there are people who are demanding as apostles, right? But they've never really been approved.
Yeah, I really like how Spurgeon used to talk about this, because he would talk about how there should be this inner call, this inner witness that you are called to be a leader in the church, a pastor or whatever else. But then there was an insistence on that should be noticed by spiritual authority. Because if it's not, then something's wrong. God will do both things. He will call you from within, and then he will speak to the authority that's over you, and it will be evident to them that you are ready to do this. So there has to be the inner and the outer.
That's
Right.
good.
Right.
I love that.
And when God does approve us to take this level of leadership, if I'm hearing what you're saying correctly, all of us are called to reach the lost and reach those around us. But there are some that God approves to be entrusted with the gospel, to preach it, to teach it, to carry it to the church. So the ones that are approved here, we are carrying the gospel to the believers who are then giving the gospel out.
Right.
Okay, I see that. So that is the called part that I talk about. We're not trying to please people. You know what? I want to jump down to this. Even though we could have asserted our authority. We could step up to our church and we could say, you owe me respect. You owe me a prime parking spot. You owe me a Bentley. You owe me.
Oh,
I mean,
Lord.
we could do any of that, and
People do.
I could take you to friends who are that way. I will never forget walking into. I'm standing there with Pastor Aaron Rummage, who's one of our pastoral care pastors. We're doing a funeral, and with this other church, and I'll never forget this pastor walking in. He's a good friend. I'd never seen this happen before. He's a good friend, and we're backstage, and we're about to go out because the funeral's being held at our church, and I watched this dude he put his arms out like this, and I went, "What are you doing?"
He's about to levitate.
And his armor bearer took his jacket off of him, put his robes on him, zipped him up, put the sashes on, completely dressed this man in front of us, and then he put his arms down and we walked out.
Excuse me.
Pastor Aaron and I are sitting there just staring at this going, what? What? I'm
feeling
does
ill.
a pastor deserve that kind of honor? Yes, most likely. But should you ever demand that kind of honor?
No.
Okay, so I'm gonna throw something out there. We can debate it. Deserve? I don't know. And accept.
Yeah.
I don't know that we should ever accept that,
Well, I
right?
don't think I could. I think I would be so freaked out and awkward in the moment. Dude, I got this.
I know people. So growing up in different churches, I've shared a few different times. I've been involved in different churches, some black churches, some white churches, some mixed churches, whatever. And I have seen that in some of the culture, especially in a lot of black churches. I'll just say it. Growing up, I saw this, what I feel is an unhealthy reverence for the pastor, right? And I get it, because it's almost like old timey prophet, the representation of the voice of God, and I get that. Respect should be there, reverence should be there, but there's sometimes this weird worship feeling almost of the man, and I was never comfortable with that. Now I notice even in I'm only 10 years into ministry, but 3 years into lead pastoring kind of, and some of older people will come up to me and I can feel a little bit of that. Nowhere near on that level, but there's this like, oh pastor, oh pastor, oh pastor, and I feel weird accepting it, right? And so my question is, for those pastors who are just throwing their arms out and letting it happen, is it going back to our last lesson? Are you in ministry because of those impure motives?
Well, I do wonder about that, because I do think, we use flattery sometimes to get flattery, or we use flattery to get the money, the greed we're after. We put on this mask to cover up the fact that what we're really after is just money. I mean, we've had a local issue with a guy who the church bought him a house on the river, and it was crazy. He ended up in jail for tax evasion. But you can't do stuff like that, and not give the gospel a bad name. If that's why you're in it, for heaven's sake, go somewhere else and make a good living somewhere. Go somewhere where it's okay. I mean, look, we've proven we see the Trumps and the Musks and all that. You're allowed to be a billionaire in this world if you can earn it. You're allowed to do that. Don't do it in the church. Just don't do it here. This is not about that.
Some of those guys who demand not just that you tithe, but also that you give a man a God fee.
Oh yeah,
makes me absolutely sick. All these stories make me sick. But nevertheless, it happened. It brings me back to this cross-reference in Philippians where he's talking about whether we preach the gospel with impure motives or not, we rejoice that the gospel's going forward. How would you juxtaposition that with this conversation right now? Because it makes me want to punch somebody. But I'm glad the gospel's being preached, if indeed it's being preached. From impure, because he talks about preaching from impure motives.
Let me say this. Let me verbalize something I don't think I've ever verbalized, but it's been in my head, which is I answered that question. Nevertheless, the gospel is preached. I answered that question with this question: in the body of Christ, is this person a muscle cramp or a cancer? And I think that stealing, going to jail because you made the church give you a house and you didn't pay taxes on it, stealing, that's a cancer. It's got to be cut out. Put your arms out and let the guy put the robe on you, that's a muscle cramp. If that's the way this group wants to do worship and do church, I'm not comfortable with it. I'm not gonna be a part of that. I don't want to be. I don't want anybody to do that for me. I don't want you to go get my car for me. I don't want you to give me a parking space up next to the door. I do not want you to call my wife the first lady. I don't want any part of any of that. Right.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But at the same time, if another group, if that's part of their cultural background, then okay, I view it as a muscle cramp.
Mm-hmm.
It is awkward. It hurts. It's not helpful.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's not cancerous.
Mm.
And so when I unpack that phrase in Philippians, that's literally what I'm doing. And I had this conversation the other day. A guy called me and said, "Hey, I've got this issue with this church plant we've got. What should I do with them?" And I literally stopped and I said, "You need to let me answer this question for me. If you leave this church alone, will it grow and reach people for Christ, or will it become a cancer in the body? Because if it will become a cancer in the body, kill it now.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
If you believe it has a chance to grow and actually do some good, even though that be minimal or limited, let it." So which is your answer?
Yeah. That's really interesting.
Something else that kind of crosses sections. Of course, same writer, Paul. He says in where is it? We're somewhere in verse 4, he talks about not pleasing people, pleasing God. This is the same thing in Galatians, right? And I think this is just me. We can debate it, but I think one of the reasons why he says this is to show his heart, right? Whether I am praising you for the good things you've done or whether I am correcting you, it's not to get on your good side or your bad side. I'm being obedient to God, right? He's saying what's coming out of me, this leadership is not about being on people's fan list, right? And I just think that's so important for us as leaders to keep in mind that first we serve God, then we serve the people.
Yeah, I think it might actually be helpful just to take a moment to talk about the fact that in our culture, if you're upset with somebody or if you disagree with them, there's an assumption that you don't like them or love them. But that's not at all what the Apostle Paul gets at when he's talking about all this.
Yeah.
He doesn't pull any punches. He speaks the truth in love, which is right out of Ephesians chapter 4, right? We're called to this. He can, in other words, balance speaking hard truth or saying hard words to these churches and calling them out on their behavior and, getting in their face, so to speak, but then also love them dearly. And the reason why he loved, that he's getting in their face is because he loves them.
Yeah.
Right.
So what's more loving? Is it more loving to just see somebody destroying themselves and living a life contrary to the gospel and never saying anything and just being like, "Hey, you're doing great. I'm so happy you're here," versus calling them out and being like, "Hey, there's an issue and I need to talk to you about it because I love you and I don't want to see it destroy you."
Yeah.
Like, I think it's more loving to tell them the truth, even if it's hard, right?
Yeah. And he gets to the spot where he says, we're not trying to please people, but God who tests our hearts, right? So it says, I love you and I'm held accountable to God. I have to lead you well. I have to love you well. I have to let you know this hard truth. And which then again goes back to our leaders today allowing God to test their hearts.
Yeah.
I want to forgive what's probably going to be a long soliloquy for me right here, but I want to go at this from. I think there are two problems. I think there are two ways this plays out as a problem. I think there are those that are just too harsh, and they demand and they give me, and they're beating up people. They drive people out of the churches as quickly as they bring them in, and their churches don't grow because they keep running people off, or they wear people out, or they burn people out, and they're using the church to get something they want. I think Paul is clearly saying we're not doing that.
Yeah.
There is another flip side to this flattery thing, though, and I heard a pastor do this years ago. I mean, lots of years ago, and he talked about raising bonsai trees, and he said I clip the bonsai trees so they don't grow, and they should be 20, 30-foot trees, but they don't. They're not. They're about 1 or 2 feet tall. I clip them so they can't grow. And somebody said to me, "Well, your trees must hate you," and he said, "No. My trees love me." They said, "What do you mean? You're limiting their growth." "Oh," he said, "no. Each of those trees sits in my yard. Each of them sits on their own pedestal, in their own pot, in dirt that is created exactly for that tree, and then is fed and supplemented exactly for that. Each one has its own separate watering system that at a given time of day gives that tree exactly the amount of water it needs. I go out there and I talk to those trees and I walk among those trees every day and I clip those. He said, my trees love me, but I stump their growth.
Wow.
I think there are a lot of pastors that's the flattery they're using.
Wow.
They're taking a smaller group of people and they're elevating them. We're family and I love you and oh, it's awesome. And they're bonsai treeing them. We do. Now on the flip side, I go outside and I will trim my muscadine vines.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, those things are aggressive. If you don't trim those, they will take over the planet. You know, but I go trim those, but I'm not clipping them to slow them down. I'm taking off leaves so the sunshine can get to the fruit.
Yeah.
Okay, there's a difference between pruning to get results and clipping to stop growth.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we flatter our churches to the point that we clip them to stop growth.
That's so good.
And the only way to know the difference is let God test your heart.
Wow.
Because we really do care what our people think about us.
Mm-hmm.
We might want to act like we don't care, but we do. It's devastating. I mean, I don't know if you guys do this. Maybe it's just me. If I feel like I've hurt somebody in the church, dude, it takes me months to get past that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It just eats at me.
It does.
Even if I think I did the right thing. If I think I did the wrong thing, it might stay with me like forever.
Yeah.
You know, so I think we have to be extremely careful here.
Man, as you were talking, of course, it's low-hanging fruit, pun intended, to take it to John 15, right? The Father who clips us so that we bear more fruit. And if we're going to love people the way God's called us to love people, we're supposed to be copying him. So if he prunes us, we need to be pruning our churches and our people and doing it well, not stunting their growth.
Yeah. But that means that when God checks your heart on something and you realize, because this has happened to me, when I realize I'm ready to give in to someone or I'm ready to flatter someone just because I don't want to upset them or just because I don't want to, I have to stop and I have to realize that's what's happening. And I have to ask the Holy Spirit for the strength, for the courage, for the internal fortitude to be able to look at them and say, no, you're wrong on that. You can't do that. You can't do that and stay here.
Yep.
And I have to be able to do that or else I'm not leading this way.
And Paul did that not only by pen, but he did it face to face.
Yeah.
And we have evidence of that elsewhere, which I think is an important distinction for us because this is not necessarily enough. It's not enough to just write the Facebook message or the text. You got it. Most of the time it has to be done face to face. You got to look somebody in the eye when you're telling the truth to them in love, because that stuff gets lost very easily in the medium of writing or any other kind of transmission. It has to be face to face for them to get your heart, to really know, to see how it pains you to tell them the truth, but how important it is to you and how you love them through it.
So our goal is, forgive me, I'm just going to harken back. Our goal is that our gospel would come to you not simply with words, but also with power. And that our visit to you was not without results. That power gives us results.
Amen.
And sometimes it hurts us, and sometimes it gets us thrown into relationship prison, and sometimes it gets us beaten up, and sometimes, but in the end, the goal is the growth of every individual who knows Christ so that they would become more like Christ, so that the world might continue to know Christ.
Amen.